patiently. I'm only 5 minutes late on that, so this should be good. Basically, today I'll be presenting or going into a lot more depth on my EPQ. So, for my EPQ, I looked at this question: how far does the dispersion of wage offers affect the search time of job seekers? Now, reading that might not mean a lot to you. You might not really understand what I'm asking that, but after this lecture, you'll hopefully understand exactly what this question means and understand how this question could be possibly answered. But I want to start, before I go into this, I want to start with a quote by Professor Hajing Chang of Cambridge. He's a Chinese professor of economics, and I want you to think about this throughout the lecture. He wrote that 95% of economics is common sense made complicated, and this is a conclusion you'll see throughout this lecture, because some of the formal assumptions, some of the things I model, some of the things I stress, some of the points I stress, we all take for granted. This is common sense, and that really explains how I really came about this, why I picked this topic, because this was a topic this was a question I sort of thought up in my head randomly, and looking through research, you find that economists spend lifetimes, formalizing it in complex models, but this is something you don't have to be an economist to think about these sort of things. So I just wanted to present that before I started. So, unemployment. Unemployment, I'll just try and give an idea of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to just throw names out there, throw ideas out there. Unemployment is an important area of study in economics. Labour economists study unemployment, behavioural economists study unemployment, even outside of economics, psychologists study unemployment. So unemployment is an important area of study. What I'm trying to study specifically is what's called frictional unemployment, so people moving between jobs, and that's quite broad in itself, because I'll be looking at wage unemployment and search unemployment. So I'm just going to explain dispersion very quickly. Is that on here? So dispersion, okay, if it is, I'll just say it anyway. Dispersion, I'm looking at two types of dispersion. The range of offers in an industry, so the difference between the highest value, the highest wage offer in an industry, and the lowest wage offer in an industry. And I'm looking at variance as well, which is just a general measure of dispersion in an industry. So before I start, is there a board pen? Before I start, I just want to introduce you to, just because before we talk about search in labour markets, a much easier way to understand search would be in consumer markets. So someone was telling me about Will Matcham's Cambridge economics question, which was, you walk into Cambridge, there's a tour guide in front of you. He offers you £7.50 to be the tour guide for the day. Do you keep searching, or do you accept that job offer? Well, you can answer that any way you want. But Stigler models consumer search following this function. It's not a complicated function where this represents the average minimum price. So it's not really accurate, but it follows this. So where X is the number of searches. So as you search, the average minimum price you would expect would go down. But as you can see, the marginal return of search, the marginal benefit of search, decreases as you keep searching. So what that does for this project is that it introduces the idea that search has a finite horizon. No one's going to just keep searching and keep waiting for the best offer, because you understand that the marginal benefit of continued search is decreasing every time. So a way to answer that question could have been, if you look at Stigler's model of consumer search, it could have really gone rolled with that. So I've already explained that. So I've talked about Stigler. Following on from Stigler was McCall of the University of Chicago, and Stigler dealt with job search, but McCall was the first one to really formalize a model for job search. And his model is really complex. I mean, it's really for mathematicians to study it, because it's based on the mathematical theory of optimal stopping, which is basically, it deals with how a player makes a decision where the decision is based on sequentially observed random variables, where he's trying to minimize the cost and maximize the benefit. I mean, that just sounds like jargon to you, but hopefully when I explain my experiment, that will make a lot more sense to you. So McCall was the first one to formalize a model for job search. His model is dynamic, and his model stresses the fact that there's a reservation wage, which means that each job search each job seeker has a minimum wage they're willing to accept. And if the wage offer isn't above this reservation wage, they won't accept the job offer. So think about that. So W has to be greater than R for every accepted job offer. And do I have it here? Okay, reservation wage. So we've talked about the fact that the marginal benefit of increased search is decreasing every for each time you search. And we've talked about the fact that marginal cost will be increasing. So the reservation wage is where these two meet. I mean, A-level economists, you'll be familiar with the idea of marginality to explain, you know, equilibrium. So this is how the reservation wage is established, where marginal cost equals marginal benefit. Now this is quite simple. So understanding this is quite central to understanding the rest of what I'm going to talk about. So, no, I want to go back. I've rambled a lot about this so far, but I want to just take a step back and talk about why I did this, why I chose this topic. Because, as I said, it's part of my EPQ, and many of you are probably thinking, if you set Kingsley an EPQ, he's going to do it on a huge topic, on a topic like, what's the best way to organise society, what's the best way to, you know, is capitalism right? But these are huge questions. I wanted to, because I'm very sensitive to critiques of economics that say that economics has lost the public mission, because the questions that economists are obsessed with these days are these sort of questions, small, sharp questions, internally generated questions, questions where it only really will interest other economists or other mathematicians. So economic journals are stuffed filled with small, sharp questions that it's a conversation with other economists, but it's losing the public mission that you're talking to other people. Before I thought I could really connect with that critique, I had to do a small, sharp question first, because what I feel that the critique of economics in that respect comes from the wrong people. It comes from economic historians, those who are basically historians who spend their life thinking those big questions. So I think I needed to deal with a small, sharp question before I could really say, wait, this is what economists should be doing. I felt personally I needed to do that. And to be honest, I feel that also it's sort of my first step into being a real economist, because it's the way I research, it's the way I sort of formalise. And I want to talk, a lot of you know already about the Walker function and how I explain, so, yeah, that's Walker, Kingsley Walker. And it's not when, so a lot of people reading it are like, Walker, is that you? Yes, that's me. I called it McCall-Walker function, then I decided to drop the McCall. Not because I wanted to glorify, because I just felt weird putting his name on something that he didn't really like work with me on. So it'd be like, oh, me and him back in the day. No, because I wanted to make sure it's just a primary thing, but that doesn't mean much to you because I haven't presented Walker function. So yeah, I chose this topic because I wanted to deal with a small, sharp question that I know dominates economics journals and dominates economic thought. Another reason I wanted to pick this topic is because I wanted to do a piece of research that was sort of outside the box. And the experiment I will present to you, it's not what economists will do when thinking about a question, when trying to answer a question. Economists, this experiment focused on the human side of the problem. So this is basically, the experiment I did was like a psychological experiment, and I'm going to do it on two people here. So I'm going to need 2 volunteers later to be, Keegan, and who else? Who's going to do it? Biff, come on. Rob's going to do it, okay. I need 2 people. Hopefully, this is sort of Darren Brown sort of thing. I'm going to be doing it live, so hopefully it doesn't... Huh?
Will it be 4:25?
Yeah, it will be. Right. So hopefully what I find out here won't compromise or contradict what I actually found out in my research. I just hope that follows. But again, I was talking about, I've been hinting at the use of maths in economics. And I do try to use maths in economics, but obviously I'm not, the maths I've learned compared to the work I was reading is very limited. So I feel that economists hide behind maths. I've sort of hid behind maths, but it's very basic maths, so I'm not really hiding, I'm just wearing a different coat. So it's not really hiding. A lot of you are able to, and I really truly feel that economists hide behind maths, because once you sort of penetrate the maths, you see that the ideas and the concepts they're explaining, anyone can understand it. So what's the point of, cloaking in so much maths? Is that necessary? But I feel that it is. It's an easier way of communicating the idea. Or once we've been through the idea and you look at the function, you can think, oh yeah, that's how you present this idea to someone. Hopefully you see that. So we talked about the 2 types of dispersion. Let me just go back to the problem now of So I want to, actually, do I want to go back to the problem? No, I want to keep going with this structure. Okay, so we've talked about dispersion, which is variance and range. And it's important to just establish why dispersion, that dispersion of wage offers for homogeneous labour exists. Because what we learn in school is that wage rates are established where demand for labour meets supply of labour. And this is classical equilibrium theory. But obviously that's not the case. And Stigler was the first, I'll mention Stigler again. Stigler was the first to really explain this, because look at the markets for commodities. Commodities are probably the most homogeneous goods we can find. And Stigler was able to show to us that even these goods are not characterized by single prices. So why should we expect labour, which is far less homogeneous, to be characterized by wage dispersion? But I just think it's important to establish that wage dispersion exists and why it exists. And there's obviously a lot more interesting explanations. These two men, Albrecht and Axel, they explain that dispersion of wage offer exists because different firms have different costs of search. So, and that's the cost of posting the wage, and also the cost of having that vacancy unfilled. So how much will it cost a firm to leave that vacancy unfilled? And is the fact that wage dispersion can coexist with profit maximising firm. Because think about this, a low productivity firm can charge a relatively low wage, relative to the industry, a relatively low wage, and tolerate a tolerate a high level of labour turnover. Because they know that with the low wages, the more productive firms will poach their better workers. So there's a constant exchange of workers. They never really have workers for as long as the high wage, the high productive firms. So it's the fact that dispersion of wage offers can exist. I omitted this in my actual final essay because I thought it was interesting to explain, it was important to explain, but it didn't act to the central thing I was trying to find out. So, just going back to, do I want that there? Before I do the experiment? No, I don't. I just wanted to go back to the idea that, so what we've established through McCall that no single job seeker will accept a wage offer unless it's greater than the reservation wage. So what I did was, okay, let me just introduce the Walker function. This is the first thing I did. Okay, and throughout this, I want you to probe me because none of this is perfect. I could have got something huge wrong. So if you find a mistake in this arena, it'll be much better. So really probe me. The Walker function was my attempt to sort of maintain consistency with literature in this field. So it's the idea of just using maths, when we had Philip Kirk here, the models he was able to create, simple ideas, but he was able to quote them in maths, just made it easy to understand. So we've established that no job seeker will accept a job unless it's greater reservation wage, and I'm also introducing the fact that dispersion affects reservation wage. So, where this is the reservation wage, and this is the mean wage offered in the industry, and this is dispersion of wage offered in the industry. The Walker function represents the expected search term of a job seeker. So for now, this is what we can model as the expected search term of a job seeker. The ratio of that job seeker's reservation wage to the mean wage offered in the industry and the dispersion of wage offers. So we're saying that the reservation wage perfectly matches the mean wage offered in the industry. The job seeker search term is completely dependent on dispersion. Obviously that's not the case, and that's what I try to evaluate throughout this project. How important is dispersion? Are there other factors? Are there other components that I've missed out? How important are those components? And that's basically the project. Could you pause the video?